Wavelength, sparking the convos about Adelaide you should be having on Fresh 92.7.
Welcome to Wavelength, sparking the convos about Adelaide you should be having. We're back, people, and we hoped you missed us just as much as we missed you. We've got a brand new team, sound, and a whole lot of new stories. I'm your host, Cass, and tonight I'm joined by the incredible Alex and Grace.
It's been another huge week of news, and we've got a great show tonight. With lettuce, electricity and petrol on the rise, we are talking about the cost of living crisis and how it's affecting young people in Adelaide. To learn more, we're chatting to Scott Keeley, a financial advisor from Wakefield Partners, and Greg Pattinson, the CEO of Foodbank.
We are also going to explain the new Gawler line and tell you all the good news that is happening this week.
But before all of that, I sit down with Hayley Brown, the CEO and founder of Vacayit, to talk a bit about what they do.
Wavelength.
So Vacayit is what we say an audio guide to the world. So we replace images and replace them with sounds, stories and history clips from destinations all around Australia to create engaging stories so that people who are blind or low vision can make informed and independent decisions before they travel.
What was it that inspired you to create the platform?
Had the opportunity to present something to the World Tourism Forum about 2 years ago about a gap in the tourism industry. And so I was talking to my friend Henry over dinner about problems with the tourism industry. And my friend Henry has been blind since birth, for reference. And he started telling me some of the stories of some of his travels that he's experienced. And, while they were funny, I think the problem was maybe a lot deeper than what it was, which is that there's a lack of information available online. And because everything is imagery, it makes it super hard to make informed and independent decisions.
And what do you hope that you can achieve with Vacayit?
So right now we're launching mid-July, and we'll be launching with just information from destination marketing organisations around Australia. And that's just at a base level. However, going into the future, what we're really looking forward to is the opportunity to have user-generated content so people can tell stories wherever they are in the world. We're also looking at hopefully creating some booking platform to put into it going into the future so that people can book directly on the app and it will be 100% accessible.
Are there things that you'd like to see or that you think companies could be doing that would support those that are blind and low vision?
Well, I think the list is endless, but just to start off with, it does tap on physical infrastructure. And that's making sure that people can get into your building, people can experience it while they're there. And this is something that we've been trying to say to people, is that just because you've got the access to the building doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be a good experience. So what we're doing is actually allowing organisations to tell stories so that people can have a little bit of information about a lot of things and have just enough to make even bad experiences better. That's what we're trying to hope that organisations are doing. If people are calling them and saying, hey, do you have a ramp into this building? Then if they do have a ramp, obviously it's because they're calling because they can't find that information online. So putting it on, and it's about being proactive instead of reactive, because being proactive means that you're always moving forwards, and when you highlight a problem, you do something about it, and then aiming to do little things along the way, because we're never going to be fully accessible without starting. So it's just about starting and learning and being open to being better. One of the few things that we can do is just around web accessibility and making sure that the website that you have is actually accessible for all of the users. And you can do this just by Googling, is my website accessible? And that's one thing that will allow more people to be able to come to your experience.
Wavelength.
Thanks for that, Grace and Hayley from Vacayit. Definitely something to think about there. It's something we do not give enough consideration to. Now, don't go anywhere. Up next, Amber and Cass talk about the cost of living crisis.
You're listening to Wavelength.
Wavelength.
Welcome back to Wavelength, sparking convos about Adelaide you should be having.
You may have noticed your grocery shops getting increasingly more expensive and heard cost of living crisis thrown around on the news. But what does it actually mean?
That's right. Earlier this week, I reached out to Wakefield Partners to understand more about this topic.
Wavelength.
Recently, all over the news, we have heard about the cost of living crisis. Can you explain what that is?
Most people are accepting of the fact that cost of living is going to increase gradually. We accept that our coffee's going to go up a little bit every now and again, that car insurance will creep up, and that a meal and a few drinks at the pub will cost a little bit more this year than last year. In fact, it's pretty much healthy for an economy to have gradual cost of living increases or inflation. For it to change from a gradual cost of living increase to a crisis, It really means that a perfect storm of events have conspired to drive up the costs of goods and services across the board. So we've got things like, the Russia-Ukraine conflict has driven up the price of food, predominantly wheat and energy. Seasonal weather events, the storms in Queensland and New South Wales, and general climate change are impacting crops. And the fact that just generally COVID has meant that there's a lot more money slushing around in the economy. All of these things have conspired to push prices up. Now, it's not unusual for us from time to time to have one or two of these events occurring, but a crisis occurs when all of these things seem to be happening at the same time.
The cost of living, electricity and other household items have increased significantly. Is this likely to continue?
So if we think about the humble lettuce, clearly the issues driving up the price of lettuce can be things like crops being wiped out due to floods. Those things are often short-term in nature, so it may be towards the end of this year or early next year that the price of a lettuce creeps back down to a more normal level. However, electricity bills and things that are linked to the Russia-Ukraine crisis, it's much more difficult to put an end date on those.
The recent Labor government increased the minimum wage by 5.2% to match inflation. What does this mean?
So the government measures inflation by the Consumer Price Index, or CPI, which is essentially a basket of goods and services that they measure the price of each quarter to see whether that's gone up or down. Now, this basket of goods and services in the most recent quarter had increased 5.2% from the previous year. The same basket of goods and services is now 5.2% more expensive. And the government recognises that when there's a cost of living crisis, the pressure is felt most by those on lower incomes. So their view was if we increase the minimum wage by 5.2%, at the same time as cost of living going up by 5.2%, then surely we're breaking even, right? Surely that means that our increased wages go out the door for the increased expenses that we have. However, the issue with this is that that's not technically correct. I mean, everybody's lifestyles and the way they spend their money is different. The 5.2% is simply an average across the basket of predetermined goods and services set by the government. If the goods and services you use have gone up by 10 or 15%, well then the 5.2% increase that you've received may not quite be enough.
As a financial advisor, do you have any advice for Adelaide people to help them get through this time?
You could ask your boss for a pay rise. No, seriously, probably there's just a couple of messages about this. I think it's really important to understand that inflation and cost of living increases are cyclical in nature. So at any point in time, we're either in a high inflation world or a low inflation world, and we're only ever a few years away from the next period of the alternative. While we may well be in for a tough few months or years ahead, it will end. The storm will pass. I think it's really important to avoid sensationalist media on this stuff. There's enough doom and gloom in the world without adding in cost of living pressure. So I think it'd be remiss of me as a financial and investment advisor not to bring out the eternal optimist in me. My view is strongly that all events of economic turmoil create opportunities.
Wavelength.
Thanks, Scott. That was Cassie there talking to Scott Keeley from Wakefield Partners about the cost of living situation. You're listening to Wavelength.
Wavelength.
Welcome back to Wavelength, sparking the convos about Adelaide you should be having.
Up next, we have Amber, who spoke to the CEO of Foodbank, Greg Pattinson, about how young people are coping through the cost of the living crisis.
Wavelength.
So everyone's seen the rising costs of groceries, especially with iceberg lettuce. Can you share your thoughts and experiences with the cost of living crisis?
Yeah, look, I think it hit us on two fronts. The first thing is we've seen an increase in demand. We've seen more people coming in to try to get food who previously have never been in that position before. So a lot of these people have jobs. They're not out of work. They're not unemployed. They're not, homeless or anything like that. They literally cannot make ends meet, and perhaps they've paid a bill and they've paid their rent and they don't have any money left for food that week. It can be quite distressing for the person going through that problem, particularly if they've got kids. At the same time, we're also, because we buy a lot of the food that we distribute, we're also seeing an increase in the cost of that food. So, for example, milk 12 months ago, we were able to buy milk for 70 cents a litre. We're paying $1.50 a litre now. So that means automatically we can only afford to buy half of the amount of milk that we were able to buy 12 months ago. So it's also limiting, because we do all that through our fundraising, very little government support to do what we're doing, means we've had to either cut the amount of food that we buy, or, as has happened recently, we've had to actually put the prices up for the foods that we do charge a small fee for. And that's the first time we've had to do that for 8 years that I've been at Foodbank. And that is really difficult for us.
Can you share what people can do if they would like to help support Foodbank's generosity?
Yeah, of course. Look, first and foremost, if people have spare food in their cupboards and they're perhaps getting close to its best before date, we're very happy to take food donations. People can also help us by donating money. Our website, foodbanksa.org.au, has a donation portal. Much as we love people buying food for us and bringing it in, we would probably much rather they give us the money, because we can actually buy probably 3 times the amount of food that anyone could if they were going to the supermarket. The other thing people can do is spread the word about what we're doing. Come and have a look at what we do. We love people coming in to our warehouse in Edwardstown and having a look at how we help people. If you ever see any politicians out there, we'd love you to spread the word that Foodbank needs more help. If there's people out there that are looking to give back to the community, we'd be very happy to talk to you about volunteering, particularly in country areas. If there are people in country, South Australia, who've got a couple of hours spare each week that want to help, we can offer volunteering roles in a variety of things.
What can people do if they are struggling during this time, and who is eligible?
What we're saying to people is, don't be afraid to put your hand up and ask for help. There are some organisations out there that can help. First port of call, if you don't know what to do, is give Foodbank a call, again on our website, and we will direct you to some of the very good organisations like the Salvos, like Anglicare, who can actually help you through those problems. And it might just be financial counselling or just a simple referral to one of our food hubs. We are very happy to be the first port of call if people need help. We don't let people go away empty-handed, put it that way.
Wavelength.
Thanks for that, Amber and Greg. It's great to hear about local options if you need or want help. Well, up next, one of our new journalists, Kieran, explains a new and improved Gawler line. Don't go anywhere.
You're listening to Wavelength.
Wavelength.
Welcome back to Wavelength, sparking the convos about Adelaide you should be having. Tonight we have one of our newest recruits, Kieran, to explore the new and improved Gawler line in Wavelength Explains.
Wavelength Explains on Fresh 92.7.
Have you ever been frustrated by a late train? 5 minutes, 10, 20? How about 14 years? On the 12th of June, the Gawler train line finally reopened to passengers after completion of the Gawler rail electrification project. This has been a cause for celebration for northern commuters who have been frustrated by delays, interrupted services and extended closures. But how did we get here? All aboard for the history of the Gawler train line. Works began in 2008. The state government planned to rebuild the line in preparation for full electrification, all made possible by co-funding from the federal government. Throughout 2010 and 11, the line was closed in stages so as to cause as little interference to commuters as possible. October 2013 saw the project postponed when the incoming Abbott government pulled the federal funding, derailing it completely. The state government announced in 2018 that state and federal funding was secured, guaranteeing the completion of the line. The project was back on track with work finally commencing November 2019. The arrival of COVID in 2020 affected all rail services, as did a mechanical fault, which saw 50 of Adelaide Metro's 70 diesel trains put out of action. Partial services run from Gawler to Salisbury until finally, on Christmas Day 2020, the entire line was closed, with substitute buses running the full 45 kilometres until the project's completion. This has been a long ride, and it definitely could have been smoother. The Seaford line started its rebuild and electrification project in 2008 as well, and was completed in 2014 after an 11-month complete closure. The end result featured an extension from Noarlunga to Seaford, full electrification, an overpass at the Oaklands Park station, and a complement of electric trains. In comparison, the Gawler line took 14 years, was closed entirely for almost 18 months with partial closures adding to much more. And now it is open. Only 4 trains are in fact electric, with old diesel engines being used until at least March next year, the final cost of which has been quoted at about $900 million.
Wavelength.
Thanks for that, Kieran. That was really, really informative, especially for a southerner like me who has no idea what's going on in the north.
Same here. I've never caught a train in Adelaide.
In Adelaide? You've never caught a train in Adelaide?
Never had to.
Well, have I got a fun evening planned for you?
Gawler line. Moving on, the world can be a miserable place, but don't worry, up next, Cass goes through all the good news stories of the week.
You're listening to Wavelength.
Wavelength.
Welcome back to Wavelength. In the mood for some good news? Don't worry, we have your back. Every episode we like to add some good vibes to the show. This week I'll take you through all the good news that's happening this week.
I know there's gonna be
Heaps good news on Wavelength.
The news can be a little sad and downright depressing at times, to say the least. Here at Wavelength, your happiness is our top priority, which is why we have a segment dedicated to cheering you up. Let's look back on the good news stories that have happened this week. Despite all the abortion news in America, South Australia has finally decriminalised abortions. South Australia was the last state in the country to decriminalise, but this hasn't stopped celebrations. For the first time ever, telehealth abortion care will be accessible in Adelaide, and clients will only need a prescribed script rather than having to go to the hospital for an abortion. If you haven't gotten your flu jab this season, don't worry. Daddy Peter Malakanauskas has extended the free flu shots till the end of July. You can receive the jab at your local pharmacy or GP. After 25 years, Microsoft Internet Explorer has finally retired as of mid-June, which some have described the death as slow and painful, but I want to pay tribute to the best browser for downloading Google Chrome. Planning a romantic adventure in Adelaide? Well, as if we need another reason to love Peter Malakanauskas, seniors card holders can now travel free on public transport 24/7 from July 1st. I can't think of a better way to spend my day than checking out the new Gawler line or taking a bus straight to Paradise. And in national news, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has appeared to forget Anthony Albanese's name at the NATO summit in Madrid. He attempted to make a quick recovery, stating,
"It's a real pleasure to be meeting with a great progressive leader. We're really excited to have a friend in Australia. Australia's been a long-time friend."
Don't worry, Justin, we've all been there. Well, that's all I have for you this week. Geez, with the state of the world, I'm surprised I got this far.
Wavelength.
And that brings us to the end of the show tonight. Thanks for listening.
Make sure you subscribe to the Wavelength podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere else you listen to podcasts. You can listen back to our old episodes right now, and tonight's episode will be up soon.
Thanks for joining me, guys. It's always a pleasure, as always, and thanks for tuning in this week. We're back in 2 weeks with another episode, sparking the convos about Adelaide you should be having.
Wavelength.